But when I got this album and I kept listening to it, I kept finding myself returning to it. But my number one of the year is Neck of the Woods by Silversun Pickups.
2012 was a long time ago, and it was a great year for music. A lot of heavy hitters came out that year. A lot of newcomers showing some great ideas. A lot of older bands showing they still had gas left in the tank. And I figured today I would take a look at what I had originally named my album of the year a little more intimately, because I've talked about it in the last couple of years through reformatted discography reviews and the like, and I figured I would give it one last pedestal on the channel by looking at the track listing from the third outing from the Silversun Pickups, the album that I still considered to be my favorite of theirs, Neck of the Woods, an album that saw them adding a little more electronics into their soundscape and continuing to throttle into a good creative pocket, at least I think personally. It's an album that's never gotten huge adoration across the board, but it's an album that still feels special to me, so I'm going to talk about it. Ranking the track listing from least to most favorite, talking about why. Pretty simple. Let's get into it. You know, the build-up throughout the closer Out of Breath feels very apt given it's off the heels of one of the slower groovy songs, Gun-Shy Sunshine. But I feel like by the time this song rolls around and I'm settled into its groove, it feels like it's sort of pulling from a lot of the same tricks that the album's already kind of thrown at you, and it acts as more of a good sort of highlights reel of what the album had to dazzle by and large. It's not my least favorite song because it's a bad song, but it definitely feels like the point at which the album feels like it's running out of breath, as it were. And the chorus itself sort of alludes to some of the same spooky adjacent energy that the album had at its core, but it feels on the lower end of that spectrum of horror-inspired writing. I enjoy the groove here. I like the eventual leads coming in to act and to throw to the song into the bridge. I think the snare rolls are really nice and they act as a good punchy moment once they finally come into the fray. And again, the build-up that this song has is pretty nice, but in an album where they've done some really good crescendos and build-ups, Out of Breath just sort of feels like the one last dance that the album sort of needs to give itself the finale that it deserves. Now, while I enjoy the evolution and the writing of Here We Are, I feel like it's one of the few songs that feels just a smidge too long. By the time the final chorus keeps doing its revolves, I kind of get tired of the track. You know, it comes in at a good point in the track listing. It's a good, soft, slower-paced moment after the kinetically driven Busy Bees. I enjoy the sparse soundscape that the track is working for. I feel like it gives the lyrics a little more of a stage to shine, the song itself being about the beginning and ending phases of a relationship. But again, it just feels like a moment where, while I appreciate the album sort of slowing down, it almost grinds to a halt by the time the track is over. And I just feel like it's one of the few tracks in here that could use a light trimming, if I'm being completely honest. Ironically enough, we're going to have a chunk of the record in the next couple of spots because I've got dots and dashes at this point because I like the song and I feel like it acts as a good bridge between the Pit's energy and Gun-Shy Sunshine's lumbering groove, but I think that dots and dashes, while it leans even heavier into the ambiguously horror-inspired lyrics, some of the lyric sheet on here reads like you're talking to a werewolf in almost a therapy session, and I like the sort of mid-tempo groove that's here. I really love the pre-chorus, and I love the chorus. I feel like it's a good lead-in and a good build-up to that, and I think that the explosion, the crescendo that this song reaches mirrors some of the great crescendos that this album has. Again, when just stacking it against this track listing, it sort of falls lower on the list than I even thinking it was going to, because I do enjoy the song, and when it comes in and the track listing, I'm ready to settle into the groove that it's got you in. But for some reason, when I was respinning this record and just laying out the track listing, this just ended somewhere on the lower end of it. Again, I like the lyrics on here, and I like that while I feel like the album does lose its focus in the horror-inspired stuff, when stuff like this crops up in the track listing, I think it's very enticing and exciting, and I enjoy the bass groove here. I enjoy the hand claps that come in throughout the track as well. I feel like it sort of enhances that sort of potential therapy session with a werewolf that at least I see the lyrics to have. I could be wrong, but that could be me just reading a little too into the inspiration for the record and wanting it to crop up more than it may actually happen on the album itself. But it's still a good song, still a great late album cut, and again, it sits in a good pocket in the album, personally, I feel like. As far as taking a groove and evolving it across a song length, I feel like Gun-Shy Sunshine is a good embodiment of that. And while this record has moments where it has good build-ups and crescendos, I like that this sits in its own lower key pocket with its explosions being a little more accented by how low-key a lot of the track is. I enjoy the bass groove that crops into the chorus. I like the chorus of the song by and large, and I like the lyrics and writing on the track as well. It doesn't necessarily feel like an extension from Dots and Dashes, but it feels like it's definitely talking in a similar realm. I enjoy a lot of what the song has going on, and out of the lower key moments, I feel like this is a good embodiment of the back end of this record having greatness in that style. And I like how the groove sort of gets flipped on its head throughout the bridge of the song. I enjoy how the lead riff and the bass kind of go into a different realm while the drum sits in a different pocket and the vocal distortion gets cut into a different lane. It just creates this juxtaposition that the song kind of needs to break itself up throughout the small little sprinklings of build-up that happen without it. I enjoy it. I think it's a really good song, and I think that, it embodies a lot of the intimate moments and groove that the band has channeled well throughout their career up to this point in a completely different facet. While I think it's another track that sort of dips into its realms away from some of the ideas that the album may have had as its inspiration, Busy Bees has its own form of haunting in some of the lyrics, and I enjoy the kinetic groove that the song has at its core. It's a song similar to the tracks like Simmer or The Pit, where they sort of have this kineticism to it where the bass just sort of dances in its own realm while the band kind of builds upon it in pockets. I think that the pre-chorus's allusion to like possessions, not being in control of jotting your own notes, is a nice touch, but I think the song could have done more to explore that, especially given, again, this album is supposed to have like spooky adjacent lyrics, you know what I mean? But I enjoy this track by and large. I think the build-up to it is well executed. I like the snares that roll in. I think the guitars for the bridge when they come in are at a good point. And I enjoy, again, some of the ambiguity in the lyrics. I just kind of wish that it sort of doubled down more on some of the themes present here. Like, some lines in here just feel very baffling, even to this day, like, I heart metal, I heart wine, more so when they're combined. What the fuck does that even mean? Again, it's teasing some of the ideas, teasing some spooky concepts, but not quite doubling down on them, which I think is the song's biggest crux, honestly. And I think the explosion of Make Believe is what separates Make Believe from Busy Bees, because it's another song that's similar at its core. It's a bass and drum groove that has a really nice, catchy-ass chorus that sort of plays into some paranoia and darkness in the lyrics, but I think the actual focusing on that headspace enhances the song more so over Busy Bees, and the explosion. I love the guitar solo and the bridge of the song. I think that it's a good moment that feels like a well-earned crescendo, as opposed to some of the stuff that I may have talked about before. I enjoy this track a hell of a lot, and I think that it's, given that it's the second song in the album, it carries some of the lingering, you know, chemtrails from the explosion of the opener into a good pocket. I enjoy it. I remember when it came out, my buddy dunked on me for loving it so much because it's basically just a sped up version of Adam's song, at least the riff is. But I think it's a good use of the riff, and I enjoy the song a lot, and it definitely, I had it even higher, but again, when looking at this list, there's some real heavy hitters on this album still to this day that stand out. But Make Believe is one that should not be forgotten. It's a really good song on this project. The Pit does what I feel like a handful of tracks on the record are trying to do. One in particular above it maybe does it a little better. But I feel like The Pit acts as a point where the darkness that, again, was sort of alluded to as an inspiration gets more focused on more directly. The song itself is inspired by a Charles Burns comic that I've never actually read about these teens that I guess find this pit and gives them this disease where they start decomposing. It's a dark story that I think the Pit, the track itself, taps into pretty fucking well. I think that the choice of having this, again, sort of hypnotic groove-based song that has a slow burn build-up. The payoff in this song feels a bit more earned than a handful of the ones that I've talked about. I think that the point when the bridge comes in and Brian's just singing "No" a whole bunch of times while the explosions happen behind it before the rug gets pulled out from under the listener and you're just left in this open air where the pre-chorus comes back in is a great moment on the album that the song, again, builds to admirably. I think there's a real darkness in the lyrics that is told a little more directly, and I enjoy the track. It's a great track in the back half of the record that I think comes off of the heels of a song that is easily one of my favorites, but it acts as a good way to continue the groove from that song and put the listener still in a kinetic pocket to dance the night away in this morbid-ass album. Now, the middle point, Mean Spirits, is an incredible rager that I think comes in at the perfect time between Simmer and Dots and Dashes. It has this darkness in heaviness in it that the album, by and large, doesn't tap into, but I think the band utilizes as a good point to talk about duality of man, giving into the darkness, the dark tendencies, the mean spirits are high. You know, I think that it's a good moment on the record that I think, again, sort of spices up the track listing at a moment when it definitely needs it. And I think that it's a really good abrupt start into a good bass groove. I think the bass groove on this, when the drums come in as well, is a good moment, and it embodies a lot of what this album's shining moments are, and just a really good rager. A point where I feel like the album could have been in a better realm holistically. Bloody Mary Nerve Endings acts as a good marriage between the horror inspiration that pockets of this album are inspired by with legitimate problems or trauma that people can face. You know, it's a point where it talks about the innocence of childhood getting ruptured away due to poor life experiences happening, while putting it through the funnel of a children's horror game, Bloody Mary. And while I talked about the album sort of losing its horror inspiration in pockets like on Here We Are, and we're not doubling down on them enough like in tracks like Busy Bees, I feel like this track could have been what those tracks ended up not becoming, because I love this track. I think it's a good slower moment with a lot of ambience. I love the synthetic texturing that happens in here. I love that the drums have these sort of soft explosions that creep up. I think that the chorus of the song is infectious as hell and lends its own sort of darkness into the listener's ear. And I enjoy this track a lot. I think it embodies a lot of what the album could have been, while also capitalizing on a lot of the strengths that this album has. By and large, the further weaving of electronics is a good thing that I think the album leans into decently, but I think it reaches a good apex on a track like Bloody Mary. And while Bloody Mary embodies that sort of marriage of horror and real life really well, I feel like the opener, Skin Graft, was almost there. Lyrically, the track itself talks about skin coming alive and moving around. It could have almost alluded to sort of a werewolf-style thing like on Dots and Dashes, but it could also just be sort of lying in the horrors of needing a skin graft, the act of taking a piece of your skin and putting it somewhere else in your body because you've been horrifically disfigured due to a traumatic event. It's one of those sort of, again, almost reaches the mark, but what sets this above the other tracks that I put lower for not quite meeting the measure is that it's a fantastic tune. It's a really good opener, in my opinion. I think that the soft opener is a good sort of misdirect before the drones come in, and you're thrusted into this kinetic drum pocket that then reaches a good marriage with the bass groove. It has all of the components that the album will show off in a lot of instances in a great opening tune. You know, for all I complained about Out of Breath sort of recycling some of the album's magic tricks into one last hurrah, I feel like this showcases a lot of them in a really good show-stopping opener. The embodiment of all the praise I've sang up to this record up to this point, Simmer is the ultimate build-up this album has going on, and it comes at pretty much the middle point of the record. After the barn burner, Mean Spirits fizzles out, you get simmer creeping on in, with the guitars lingering from the last track seemingly in the distance before coming into the fray. You've got this evolving groove that evolves over the course of the song, starting smaller in the verses before getting a little bigger in the second verse. The chorus is huge and acts as a good sort of taste of things to come, but even the chorus itself gets a little more intense, at least the pre-chorus does, and the meltdown into the chorus feels all the more apt the more the song goes on. Again, it doesn't necessarily dive deep into the darkness that I've talked about this album shining at, but it has some lingering paranoia, some thoughts of things in the vents, you know, images of spiders, no one's coming to actually greet you. You know, it's definitely a track rooted in some of the illusions that this album has had going on, but I think I like this song all the more because it's like a 7-minute jam that continues to be engaging as it goes across its runtime, which for Silversun pickups aren't necessarily a bad thing, but I feel like out of their longer jams that they had written up to this point, this was easily the most encapsulating. It has some of the components that you would see in other tracks, so there's like Panic Switch and some of the intensity, while having a bit more going on in the extension of the sonic palette. I enjoy this track a lot, and I think that it's definitely the apex that the album reaches at a good point. I feel like it's a good middle point in the album, and it again throttles you into the back half of the album in a glorious splendor. And it's easily my favorite track on Neck of the Woods, an album that, again, isn't necessarily my favorite from 2012. In fact, I named my album of the decade from a different album in 2012, but it's certainly one that still holds a close place to me in my heart. What do you think of this album? I still think it's a bit underrated. Do you agree? Let me know your thoughts on Neck of the Woods in the comments down below. If you do like this video, give it a like. If you want to see more of my music, gaming, and general nerdery content, be sure to subscribe. Special thanks to my patrons. If you want to join the ranks to get early access to content, exclusive content, or to help drive the community, it's linked in the description. I'm going to get out of here, though. Thank you again so very much for watching. I've been Viral Rack. You guys are good at lots of situations, and I'll see you another day.